It began 7 years before that fateful day, with a routine landing gone wrong. On June 2, 1978, this very aircraft, Japan Airlines Flight JA8119, experienced a tail strike while landing in Osaka. The plane struck the runway with such force that it compromised the rear pressure bulkhead, the very structure designed to seal the cabin from the harsh, high-altitude environment. Although the bulkhead was repaired after the tail strike, the work failed to meet Boeing's strict standards. According to Boeing's approved repair procedures, a single continuous splice plate with 3 rows of rivets was required to properly reinforce the damaged bulkhead. However, the repair team deviated from these guidelines. They used 2 separate splice plates placed parallel to the stress crack, and only a single row of rivets was used instead of the required 3. This flawed repair drastically reduced the bulkhead's resistance to fatigue cracking, leaving it at just 70% of its intended strength. It was a warm summer evening when Japan Airlines Flight 123 prepared for its journey. This aircraft was no ordinary jumbo jet. The Boeing 747-SR was specifically configured for Japan's busy domestic routes, with over 500 passengers packed into its dense cabin layout, a design optimized for efficiency. But on that tragic day, it became a scene of unimaginable chaos and despair. At the controls were some of Japan Airlines' most experienced pilots. Captain Takahama had over 12,000 hours of flight experience. First Officer Sasaki had nearly 4,000, and Flight Engineer Fukuda was a seasoned expert. Together, they formed a team that would soon face an unimaginable test of their skills and courage. At 6:12 p.m., the Boeing 747-SR took off from Tokyo's Haneda Airport, destined for Osaka's Atami Airport. On board were 509 passengers and 15 crew members, many heading home to celebrate the Obon holiday with their families. Just 12 minutes after takeoff, at 6:24 p.m., at an altitude of 24,000 feet, a catastrophic failure rocked the aircraft. The rear pressure bulkhead, weakened by the faulty repair, ruptured. The explosive decompression tore off the vertical stabilizer and severed all 4 hydraulic systems, leaving the plane uncontrollable by conventional means. The effects were immediate and devastating. Inside the cockpit, Captain Masami Takahama, First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, and Flight Engineer Hiroshi Fukuda were thrust into an unimaginable nightmare. With the hydraulic systems completely destroyed, they had no way to control the rudder, ailerons, or elevators. Their beloved aircraft, once a marvel of engineering, was now a crippled machine, oscillating violently in a chaotic dance of Dutch roll and phugoid cycles. The phugoid cycle sent the plane climbing sharply, losing speed, then plunging downward, only to gain speed and climb again. Each wave-like oscillation tested the crew's resilience as they attempted to stabilize the aircraft using nothing but engine thrust. The method was crude, dangerous, and nearly impossible to execute with precision. But they fought on, refusing to give up. In the cabin, panic and confusion consumed the passengers. The explosive decompression had caused the walls to groan and the ceiling panels to collapse. Many passengers clutched oxygen masks that had dropped from the ceiling. But with the plane at an altitude of 24,000 feet, the thin air made it difficult to breathe, even with the limited oxygen supply. For children and elderly passengers, the effects of hypoxia, fatigue, confusion, and unconsciousness came quickly. For the crew, the situation was equally dire. Though emergency oxygen was available, the pilots never put on their masks, likely consumed by the chaos of trying to save the aircraft. The lack of oxygen would have slowed their reactions and dulled their minds, adding yet another layer of difficulty to an already impossible task. Amid the chaos, a flight attendant rushed to the cockpit to report on the cabin's condition. She spoke of passengers gripping hands, writing notes to loved ones, and praying. Acts of human connection in the face of impending disaster. For the crew, it was a sobering reminder of the stakes. They weren't just fighting for their own lives. They were fighting for the lives of over 500 people, each with a story. each desperately hoping for a miracle. Despite the overwhelming odds, Captain Takahama and his team remained resolute. They declared an emergency to Tokyo Area Control Center, requesting to return to Haneda. But communication was sporadic, and their voices masked the full extent of the crisis. With every passing moment, the aircraft grew harder to control. Each attempt to stabilize the plane seemed to come undone as the relentless oscillations continued. Yet, through it all, the crew persisted, their professionalism and courage shining through the darkest of moments. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they had to try. For over 30 minutes, the crew fought to control the crippled aircraft. But by 6:56 p.m., the inevitable became clear. The right wing struck trees on a ridge near Mount Mikuni, causing the plane to roll sharply. 3 seconds later, the right wing clipped another ridge at a height of 1,610 meters, shearing off the outer section of the wing and the remaining engines. These impacts caused the aircraft to invert and plummet into the slopes of Mount Takamegahara. The force of the crash obliterated much of the fuselage, leaving only scattered wreckage. The crash of Japan Airlines Flight 123 remains the deadliest single-aircraft disaster in aviation history. Of the 524 people on board, only 4 survived. The tragedy brought significant changes to aircraft maintenance standards and highlighted the extraordinary bravery of the crew. Captain Takahama and his team showed an unrelenting resolve, doing everything humanly possible to save their plane against insurmountable odds.